A little while, I want you to turn to John 6. We've been in John 6 last Wednesday night and Sunday morning. Now, we took them a little bit out of order because I wanted to do one part on Sunday morning. But John chapter 6 is basically this. Three big things happen in John 6. In the first set of verses is where Jesus feeds the 5,000. That's what we looked at Sunday morning, and we talked about that incredible story and the amazing thing that the Lord did. The second thing that happens after that is that night, after he had fed everybody, and he sent the disciples to go get on the boat, go across the Sea of Galilee, and then he sent the crowd home, and then he went up in the mountain to pray. That's what we looked at last Wednesday night. So we kind of flip-flopped the order, but those are the two big things that happen in the first 2/3 of John chapter 6. But John 6 is a long chapter, and there's one other thing that happens, and that's what I want us to look at tonight for just a little while. Now, we're going to jump right in because I want to get through these verses and not take too long to do it. But I just want you to notice what happens because this is an intriguing end of the story. But you got to keep in mind what happened. There's the feeding of the 5,000. That comes into this part of the story. There's the fact that they'd gone across the Sea of Galilee during the storm, and that comes into play. Notice the way it happens. The day following, that's after the feeding of the 5,000, after the storm that night when Jesus walked on the water and got in the boat with the disciples, and Simon got out of the boat and walked with him a few steps, and after all that had happened, when the people which stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was none other boat there save that one whereinto his disciples were entered. Now here's what the crowd's trying to figure out. Where's Jesus at? Because remember, he had stayed where the miracle took place. They saw the disciples get in a boat by themselves and leave. Then they all left. They knew Jesus wasn't in that boat. Now, what they don't know is the Lord walked out on the water that night to the boat and got in. They have no idea any of that happened. So they're trying to figure out where's Jesus. That's their thing. And that Jesus went not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples were going away alone. That was the last thing they saw. Howbeit, there came other boats from Tiberias, nigh to the place where they'd eat bread. After that, the Lord had given thanks. Now, here's what they start thinking. Well, maybe Jesus got on another boat the next morning, and maybe he's gone somewhere else because he doesn't seem to be where the miracle happened anymore. That's what they're trying to ascertain. Is he still where he fed us? And if he's not, where'd he go? Now, isn't it interesting that people were actively searching for the Lord? It's too bad there's not more of that going on today, isn't it? Here's people, and these are not all believers by any stretch of the imagination, but they're actively seeking Jesus out. Now, it says, when the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, that is, where the miracle had taken place, neither his disciples, they also took shipping, came to Capernaum. Notice those last three words, seeking for Jesus. Now think about this. When they went over there where the miracle had taken place, and they had looked around, they can't find the disciples, they can't find Jesus, they can't find any boats, they can't find any answers. You know what a lot of people would have done right then? They'd have gone home. Just give up, go home. I mean, isn't it many times in our nature, if we don't get the answer we're looking for in a hurry, to just give up, throw in the towel, and quit? This is how much people were drawn to the Lord. They were so drawn to him that instead of just saying, well, who knows where he is, the Bible says they all got in boats and went to Capernaum. Now, here's their reasoning. If he's not here, chances are he's in Capernaum. Now, the reason they assumed that's where he might be is because, it's a logical answer, that was his base of operations. Capernaum is the hometown of Andrew and John, Simon, and James. This is where all the two sets of brothers live. And we know from other verses that Jesus basically lived in the home with Simon Peter. Because we know he doesn't have his own house, he doesn't have his own place. We know he grew up, he was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, but when he became an adult, he left Nazareth and spent most of his time in Capernaum living with Simon Peter and his family. You say, how do you know he lived there? Because the Bible tells us that. In fact, one of the funny moments in Scripture that wasn't really meant to be funny, but it kind of is when Jesus was living there and Simon Peter's mother-in-law got very sick. You remember that story? And Jesus healed her. And it was one of those miracles that Simon said, Lord, I didn't ask you for that. Some of you, that'll hit you on the way home. But he said, that was a miracle I did not ask for. But he healed her. He lived there. He lived with the family. You know, it was when he was preaching in Simon Peter's home that, remember, the 4 guys with their friend on the stretcher came and ripped the roof off the house and that's where Jesus was. That was the base of operations. So they decided, okay, you know what? He's not where he fed us, so I bet he went back to Capernaum. That's where headquarters is for this guy. So they go there. And when they had found him on the other side of the sea, that's the Sea of Galilee, this big lake, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest thou hither? In other words, they were like, how'd you get over here? How did you get back on this side of the lake? Because when we saw you late last night, you were on the other side of the lake. The disciples had left. There were no other boats. So how did you get here? And here's the thing about Jesus. A lot of times, he doesn't answer the question people are asking. He answers more important questions. Jesus answered them. Notice, Jesus answered them. Now, what was their question? How'd you get here? But notice what he says. Verily, verily, the word verily, as most of you know, simply means truly. When Jesus does a double verily, he's just saying truly, truly. In other words, Jesus, it's kind of like when somebody says, I'm telling you the truth. I promise I'm telling you the truth. And they tell you something. That's what verily is. It's just a double expression of what I'm about to say is true. I say unto you, you seek me, not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat of the bread and eat of the loaves and were filled. Now, did he answer the question they asked? No. They asked, how did you get here? What did he answer? Why are you here? He's answering questions nobody asked. But he's answering and addressing the more important issues. Jesus understands, it doesn't matter how I got here. The real issue is, why are you here? Why are you here? By the way, isn't that a good question to ask on a Sunday morning church service? Why are you here? Are you here because your mama made you? Are you here because your parents forced you? Are you here to placate the wife or the husband? Are you here because it's Sunday morning and this is ritual and this is what you do on Sunday morning, so I guess I'll go? Are you here to worship? Are you here because you have a heart for God? Jesus is asking and answering the more important question. He's saying, how I got here doesn't matter. What does matter is, why are you here? And then he answers it for them. He says, you're not here because of the miracle. You're not here because of who I am. You're here because I fed you. By the way, we all know, you want to get a bunch of Baptists together, feed them. You'll draw a crowd, right? Jesus understood. He said, you're here because I fed you, and now you're expecting what? More food. He's going to be very clear on that. Listen to what he says. Labor not for the meat which perishes. Now, the word, what have they been doing all day? They've been laboring, trying to find him. He says, the only reason you've been trying to find me is because you think I might feed you again. He said, but you're chasing the wrong food. Labor not for the meat which perishes, that's normal, regular, earthly food, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life. Isn't this very similar to the discussion he had with this Samaritan woman about don't be so focused on the water in this well, focus instead on the living water that'll change your eternity? This is very similar to that discussion. He says, you need to be focusing on the bread that will give you everlasting life, not bread that will ease your hunger pains for a few hours. That bread which the Son of Man shall give unto you, for him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, what shall we do that we might work the works of God? In other words, they said, well, what can we do to make God happy? How can we appease God so that we can have this bread that gives everlasting life? Jesus answered and said unto them, this is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he hath sent. Do you notice how he just steered this to a much more important discussion? They wanted to know. What did they want to know? How did you get here? He says, let me ask you something more important. Why are you here? And why are you chasing the things in this life that are temporal, that won't last? Why don't you pursue something that will change your eternal destiny? And they said, well, how do we do that? And then he very simply told them, by believing on him that God sent. By the way, isn't that how we all get there? Jesus just steered the conversation right into an evangelistic discussion. He took it right where he wanted to go. They were wanting to talk about things that weren't important. By the way, there's plenty of people out there that'll still want to do that. They'll want to talk about the 10 toes on the beast in the book of Revelation. And by the way, Revelation's a fascinating book. But if you understood, and none of us ever will, but if you understood every detail in the book of Revelation, that wouldn't get you 1 inch closer to heaven or anybody else. What is important is finding out if somebody's ever put their faith in Jesus Christ in a personal relationship. Jesus took the conversation to the more important things, and he did this all the time. They said therefore unto him, and this is the craziest moment right here. They said therefore, because remember he just said, you need to believe on me, I'm the one the Father sent, right? He just said, I'm God. Now watch this. What sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? In other words, they said, what have you done to prove you're the Son of God? Do you know what a stupid question that is? What did he do less than 24 hours earlier? He fed 25,000 people with a couple pieces of bread and fish. But isn't it true of human nature how quickly we what? Forget. How quickly we forget. They've seen him do all kinds of stuff. And just, again, less than 24 hours earlier, they saw him do one of the most remarkable miracles he ever did when he fed this humongous crowd. And yet they turn right around and say, how do we know that you're really the Son of God? What have you done? What miracles have you done? And Jesus got to be thinking, you got to be kidding me. Now listen to what they do. Our fathers, now they're talking about Jewish history here. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. You remember in the Old Testament, they lived on the manna in the desert for 40 years. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. They said, we know that God gave our forefathers bread to eat. Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, there's another one of those double verilies, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, the bread they ate in the wilderness was great and wonderful, but that was just a picture. That was just a poor imitation of the real bread of life that my Father is now giving, which, by the way, was what? Jesus. He's saying that was just a symbol of what was coming, and I am what was coming. For the bread of God, here it is, he's going to identify it, is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life to the world. That's the true bread from heaven. Jesus was that bread. You know that in the book of John, Jesus oftentimes would use these I am statements. He would say, I am the living water. He would say, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the good shepherd. He's going to add another one to that in just a moment. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. Does this not sound like the Samaritan woman? Once he made the case that there is something that will satisfy you for eternity, what did the Samaritan woman say? Give me that living water. They say, give us that bread. Jesus said unto them, notice these next two words. What? I am the bread of life. Jesus said, I am what you're looking for. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. He that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I said unto you that you also have seen me and believe not. Jesus said, I'm what you're looking for. But he said, but for a lot of you, you just can't get over the hurdle. You just can't get over the hurdle of really believing that I am the Son of God. How tragic would it have been to be that close, to be standing face to face with Jesus, to have seen many of these miracles and still walk away refusing to acknowledge that he was who he said he was. That's pretty tragic. But that's what a lot of them did. He said, all that the Father giveth me shall come to me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. In other words, he said, if you'll come to me, I'll take you in, I'll save you, you will live forever with me in heaven. For I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which has sent me, that of all which he hath given me, I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. In other words, Jesus said, you come to me, you put your faith in me, I won't lose you, I won't misplace you, I won't let you get away. I promise you that there will come a day when we will live together forever and ever and ever in heaven. And he stood right there and told them that. But some of them still couldn't get there. Notice what he says. The Jews then murmured. Here it comes. Here it comes. They murmured at him because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. In other words, because he made himself equal with God. Because he said, I am God. They couldn't get over that hurdle. And here's part of the reason why. And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he saith, I came down from heaven? They couldn't get past it. They were like, wait a minute. How can he be the Son of God? We know him. We know his mother. We know his father. How in the world can he possibly be the Son of God? Again, what's that old saying? Familiarity breeds what? Contempt. And they could not, many of them could not get past the fact, they're like, we watched you grow up. We know who your parents were. There's no way you could be the Son of God. Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, murmur not among yourselves. He knows what they're saying. He knows what they're thinking. No man can come to me except the Father which has sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. Not that any man has seen the Father, save he which is of God. He has seen the Father. Verily, verily, another one of those double trulies. I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. This is the most important of the double trulies in this chapter. Jesus said, guys, I'm going to tell you something. This is true. You can take this to the bank. You can believe what I'm about to tell you. Anybody that believeth on me hath, not will have, not should have, not ought to have, hath everlasting life. Saved from that moment forward. I am that bread of life. He makes it as clear as he could possibly make it. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. In other words, Jesus said that manna you were talking about, that just sustained them for a few years. He's saying, putting your trust in me gets you all the way through eternity. That's the difference in that bread and the real bread. And he says, I am that bread. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread which I give is of my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Jesus is saying, what he's trying to make the point to them is, you put your trust in me. You invite me into your heart. I am the bread of life. But they took it this way. The Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? See how they took it? They thought he was saying, well, you've literally got to take a bite out of my arm. That's, of course, not what he was saying at all. Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. Now here Jesus did something that I think drove his disciples crazy sometimes. I think Jesus made his disciples so mad sometimes. Because you know what he'd do? Every time he'd get a big crowd and they'd really start following. Talk about making him their king. You know what he'd always do? He'd always say something like this that'd make everybody mad. Read the Gospels. He did that all the time. He did not make it easy. He challenged people. And a lot of times that challenge pushed them away. That's what's about to happen right here. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life. Now, could he have said that differently? Could he have said, now let me explain, I'm not really talking about actually taking a bite out of my arm and drinking my... He said, that's not, I'm talking about me becoming a part of you and becoming a part of your life. But he didn't do that. And I can just see the 12 sitting on the front row. You know what they're all doing at this point? They're all shaking their head. Here we go. Here we go. He's about to drive them all away, just like he's done before. For my flesh is meat indeed, my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. Rather than stopping and explaining it, he just kept hitting it. He said it over and over and over again. Eat my flesh, drink my blood. Eat my flesh, drink my blood. As the living Father sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. This is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. These things said he in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. Now there's a big crowd. Everybody's happy until he got to the end of that. It made it really, really difficult. And like I said, I can see the disciples sitting on the front row, all of them with their heads down, shaking their heads, going, well, there goes the crowd again. And sure enough, look at the next verse. Many, therefore, of his disciples. Now, the word disciples here is used a lot of different ways. This isn't talking about the 12. This is just talking about his general people that had just followed him for a while. When they had heard this, said, this is a hard saying, who can hear it? In other words, they were like, man, that's tough. I don't know if I can go with him on this. When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples murmured at, he said unto them, doth this offend you? What and if you shall see the Son of Man ascend up where he was before? It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. But there are some of you that believe not. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not and who should betray him. And he said, therefore, said I unto you, that no man can come unto me except it were given of him by my Father. You know one reason Jesus sometimes made it difficult? He wanted to know that the people who really stuck with him were there for the right reason. They're not there for the food. They're not there for the miracles. They're not there for their excitement. You know what they're there for? We're here because we know you are the Son of God. That's why we're here. And if you doubt that, watch what happens in these final last few verses. From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. In other words, you know what happened in that synagogue that day? Everybody in that synagogue, probably hundreds of people, you know what they all did? They all got up and walked out and said, we're done. When the sermon was over, it was Jesus and his 12 guys. That's it. Now listen, I've made it very clear down through the years, I've preached a lot of clunker sermons, but I've never had almost the entire congregation get up and walk out. That's never happened. It happened to Jesus. Happened to him. Everybody got up and left. When it was over, it was him and the 12. And then I want you to look at what he said. Then said Jesus unto the 12, will ye also go away? He looked over at those 12 guys and he said, fellas, I've got a question to ask you. Are you going to leave me too? And you know what? No doubt, they were thinking about it. He made it difficult sometimes to be his follower. But in the answer, and as you well know, many of you know this story very, very well, Simon Peter, who is always the spokesman, who always says what everybody else is thinking, spoke up. And I want you to listen to what he said. Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, here's one of the great statements in the Bible. To whom shall we go? You know what Simon just said? Where would we go? Where would we go? Now, you know what the implication of that is? In those few moments, you know what Simon did? He ran through the options in his mind. Okay. Maybe we need to walk away from this guy. But you know what his immediate question in his spirit was? Where are we going to go? Some other religion? Some other teacher? Just quit believing in anything? This is the question that I ask people all the time in these days. When I'm talking to folks who just really have a hard time wrapping, same as this crowd, they couldn't get their arms around the fact that Jesus was the Son of God. Oh, he's a good man, miracle worker, great teacher, Son of God. Oh, no. People like that by the droves today. You know what I always ask them? Where are you going to go? If not Jesus, where are you going? You going to follow some other religion? Because they're all works-based. Every single one of them outside of Christianity is about you trying to do enough to make that God happy. You going to spend the rest of your life doing that? Getting on some religious treadmill and run, trying to wrestle a smile from some God somewhere and hoping that eventually you'll do enough good stuff and he'll let you come live in a good place? Or maybe if you're not going to do that, maybe you're just going to walk away from faith completely. Maybe you're just going to decide there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is none of that. Where are you going to go? You know one reason I'm still where I am today in terms of my faith? And listen, folks, I will tell you in a heartbeat, I've in the last 30 years, but in the last 8 years, I've gone through some really difficult moments. You know why I've still held on? This question. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? You going to go chase some other religion? You going to go chase some other God? You going to just give up on faith entirely? Listen to what Simon says. Thou hast the words of eternal life. And we believe and are sure that thou art that Christ, the Son of the living God. There's a whole lot of things I don't know. There's a whole lot of things I don't understand. There's a whole lot of things God does that makes me look up at heaven and shake my head and shrug my shoulders and wonder just like they did, what in the world? A lot of things I'm not sure of. You know the one thing I am sure of? This right here. That Jesus was, is, and always shall be the one and only Son of God, the only way to heaven. A lot of the rest of it I don't understand, but I'm clear on this point. And so was Simon. Now, real quick, here's why so many people walk away. Let me give you these 3 things in 2 minutes and we're done. A lot of people walk away because the teachings of Christianity can be hard. Jesus just illustrated that by what he said. Some people walk away from Christianity and their faith because the teachings are hard. It can be hard to understand. It can be hard to live. Some people walk away because the valleys can be long. A lot of people walk away from their faith because of suffering, trials, tribulations. Some people walk away from their faith because of this reason. Following Jesus is not easy. Anybody that tells you it's easy to follow Jesus has never read the New Testament. Nobody that followed Jesus had an easy time of it. But here's what I always try and remind people. He never promised we would. He never said, follow me and you'll laugh and party and have fun all the way to the cemetery. He never said that. He said, in fact, follow me and you'll pay a price for it. But here's what he said. Follow me. Put up with all you have to put up with. Deal with all the valleys and suffering and struggles and questions and doubts and frustrations. He said, do that. And one day, I'm going to make it so worth your while when you get to heaven, to a place where you'll never get sick and never grow old and never say goodbye. And your loved ones will be with you forever and ever and ever. Jesus said, suffer with me for a little while here on earth, and I will so make it worth your while one of these days. And that's what we hang on to. I love the question Simon asked. Lord, where would we go? Where would we go? You're the guy. We know you're the guy. So we're just going to take our questions, our doubts, our frustrations, all the things we don't understand, and we're just going to keep following you. And that's the best advice any of us will ever take. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for the opportunity to be back in your house tonight. Thank you for this good group and their faithfulness, even on this particular night. And God, I pray that something that was said here tonight was encouraging, helpful, in some way, a blessing to somebody. And Father, I pray that you will always help us to remember in those moments of doubt, in those moments of frustrations, in those moments when we just can't understand why things happen in this life the way they happen. Help us to remember what Simon said. Where would we go? If we walk away from you, where are we going to go? Because there's so much we don't understand, but the one thing we know for sure, you are the Son of God. Father, I pray that'll be helpful to